started. Firstly, we'll take some questions and answer those at the end of the webinar. There's a questions box over on your GoToWebinar control panel. If you just click on that plus, it'll drop down a little area you can type your questions. If we don't get to all the questions, we'll get them either by email, or most likely we'll give you a call and answer those questions. There will be a follow-up email after this with a link to the recording of the webinar, the PowerPoint presentation as a PDF, an appetite guide, and some other collector car sales brochures. So this year, Stuckey Company is celebrating our 25th year in business as an MGA, offering our agents access to solid A-rated carriers like Safeco, Hartford, Travelers, and Chubb, to name a few. We have 9 specialty programs and lots of agents that represent us and lots of satisfied customers. We do a lot of stuff here at Stuckey Company as an MGA. We can literally start from creating the program and the appetite just from an idea, and we go all the way through training, and everything in between. These are our specialty programs. We have a technology E&O product that we manage across the country. We insure over 10,000 software companies. It's called Safety Tech. We do some architects and engineers under a program called Aspire A&E, a insurance program for marinas and boat dealers called Harbor Guard. Our MPL is just an MPL product, miscellaneous professional liability product. We do some green energy business, personal lines, commercial lines, and if it falls outside of those two, we have a surplus lines non-standard market that we use. Next, I'd like to thank Charles Yeager, account executive for Safeco Specialty, and Stacy Stafford for presenting and making themselves available for questions during and after the webinar on the availability and advantages of the product. So I'll change presenters to Charles, and he can walk you through the Safeco webinar.
Thanks, Dwight. Hello, everyone. I'm pretty happy to be able to tell you about a great product we have here at Safeco, the Classic and Antique program. I'm one of the 13 underwriters. There's only 13 of us really, and we handle it all in-house, all the underwriting between the 13 of us for the country. We specialize. We don't do regular auto or regular home. We specialize in our specialty products, and classic car is one of them. So we can really have a base of knowledge to know what we're talking about and be consistent in our underwriting. And we're, of course, today talking about our classic car program. And definitely want you to start thinking about where you are putting your antiques and classic cars, and think about what company you may normally use and why you use that company, because we're going to tell you why we want you to consider Safeco. We're going to show you all we have to offer, and maybe even it may be even better and more than some where the carrier you're currently putting your classics and antiques. So why Safeco is your best choice to at least quote with us and see what we can offer you. We do offer an agreed value policy on total loss for classics and antiques. So whatever the coverage is bound and issued at, that's going to be the agreed value that they're going to get even 5-10 years later on a total loss minus the deductible. So make sure when you compare your policies and your carriers what they offer, if they say they offer a stated amount policy, just make sure that you understand that stated amount is, in general, stated amount is going to be that amount that they're paying premium on, or ACV, whichever is less. We're not doing that to you or to the customer. We're offering an agreed value policy. What they've been paying premium on, the basis on which they rate their premium is going to stay that value as long as it's listed and paying premium at that value. We're not going to go lower than that for a total loss. We, of course, offer roadside assistance and flatbed towing is available. We have very competitive rates. We combine all of our personal autos and classic autos on one policy for ease of doing business. The insured might be a couple. They have a couple of regular used cars, and they have a classic or antique or two. You could fit all of those on one policy to make it easier to maintain that policy, pay premiums, etc. Monoline is okay as well. If they want to keep their two other autos with the other carrier, their two regular use autos, or I want to put one classic with us, couple classics, that's fine. We do offer coverage for collections as well. We'd love to see that. We can put 4 per policy currently. That's going to go up probably in a year or two if all goes to plan. You would quote and issue classic and antiques just like you would a normal personal auto policy with Safeco. One of the reasons Liberty Mutual bought Safeco is we had such easy and slick, nice automation. It's easy to quote with Safeco. And classics and antiques, you don't have to send in paper apps or anything like that. You can do it on our electronic browser to make it easy and quick for you. It downloads into the agency management system. You have instant binding authority with Safeco. And to talk about the process just briefly, you would submit it. It would be bound. That policy comes before underwriting, and if it looks like a value we can agree to, we just go ahead and issue out the policy to the customer. There are instances when we may not be able to agree occasionally on what the customer may be thinking, hey, I've got all this money into it and I think it's worth this much, but they haven't reviewed the market values to see what the true market value is on a classic or antique. And these cars, we appreciate that they're somebody's baby. A lot of time and money usually goes into a lot of these cars for restoration and whatnot. And that's one of the reasons it makes it such a great product, is people take care of these. They treat them well, they secure them well, but sometimes they aren't exactly aware of, kind of like a house when you put if you redo your basement, maybe it was studded out, the basement when you bought the home, and you go finish the basement and spend $40,000, you're not going to get 100 cents on the dollar. The same thing applies a little bit to classics and antiques. So we have to, you know, if we see the marketplace is bearing a value, we're good to go, and we even give a little bit on that. So don't worry that it's going to be really hard to write with Safeco. Here's what we cover. We cover antique, classic cars and trucks, modified vehicles, restorations, replicas, modern classics, limited production vehicles, and you may, if you watch some of these auctioneer type shows like Barnett Jackson and Meekum, you'll see resto mod. We even do some resto mods. So vehicles, we basically aren't looking for somebody to say, well, I've got an extra vehicle now and I don't drive it much. I want to stick it on a classic car policy, and it's a Yugo, or it's a you know, a car that does not have an intrinsic collector value. That's not exactly what our appetite is. We do have some low mileage discounts on the auto, regular private passenger auto policy that would apply in those type scenarios. These vehicles are for collectible type vehicles. We write vehicles up to $1 million in value with underwriting approval. The vehicle owners must have other vehicles for their regular daily use. So if it's one guy in the household and he happens to own this beautiful Corvette here, and that's his only car, that's his daily driver, that wouldn't fit into our program necessarily. So what we're expecting is these to be garaged extra vehicles that they're, you know, restoring, or they're keeping because it's classic, etc. And as I mentioned, the vehicles must be stored in a lock-in garage of the insureds. You know, they have to keep them away from potential theft and things of that nature and weather. Physical damage coverage is required. Comp only is permitted though. So if they wanted to insure it with us and they don't drive it hardly ever, they just want to put comp only, that's fine. A little side note you see at the bottom of your screen, you'll see restorations must be active and at least 50% complete. Replicas must be professionally assembled. And what I mean by replicas, we'll see a few examples on another slide, but probably our most popular is say a 65 Ford Cobra, the old Shelby designed, sort of like a little roadster race car. You see a lot of companies that are making those today. We'll write those on our classic program, but they got to be put together by the professionals. We don't want someone buying a kit and putting it together themselves. So, and here's some key rating tips to keep in mind, and this will help flesh out a little bit what we're talking about with our different ratings between antique and classic. Antiques must be 25 years or older, and only very slight modifications. You know, if they had different wheels on the car, we wouldn't make you go put that as a classic. But if they go and put a different engine in it, or put a 4-barrel with a high-rise manifold and other type things to where it's not quite the way it was when it rolled off the factory floor, a little more extensive modifications, we may have to push that to classic. Now the usage on these, we're expecting them to be very little usage. These shouldn't be driven to work. Club activities, parades, local events, occasional pleasure drives. Of course, we're looking at a car that's used less than 5,000 miles a year. And we also have a classic restricted use. Now, classic vehicles, you can write them if they're 10 years old or older. Modern classics fall under that as well. And to explain modern classics a little bit, these are cars that might be a little newer than 10 years, but they're very limited production, unique or rare. There's sort of a collectability to them. Some examples would be the Prowler, the Viper, Z6 Corvette. These are pretty limited production run vehicles that somebody buys and they don't necessarily drive it. It's not a daily driver car. They keep it in the garage. They keep it all shined up. We can give it that agreed value rating with a price break on the premium written as a modern classic because it is a collectible vehicle. We also will do the replicas, as I mentioned earlier. You know, that replica may have been made this year, 6 months ago, but we'll write it as a classic if it's replicating a classic such as the 65 Cobra, the 32 Ford 3-window T-buckets. We see a lot of those. And so, but the same usage criteria and eligibility guidelines apply just as the antique club activities, parades, local events, less than 5,000 annual miles a year. Now, we'll also write one of these classics as a regular use. Vehicles 10 years or older, they're generally between 5,000 and 10,000 miles is what we're looking for annually. They can be modified a little bit. And as I was talking about earlier, we see an antique that's had, they cut the springs and they're making it into sort of a different looking car than what it was originally out of the factory floor. Some of these older 25-year-old vehicles we can't do as an antique because they've been modified so much, and we'll still write them, but we write them as a classic restricted use or a classic regular use depending on their usage. And if anybody has any questions about that, jot that down. We'll have some time at the end for questions. Actually, we're at that questions part, so please let me, Dwight, if it's okay, I'm ready for questions if you are.
Yeah, you bet. So there are a ton of really great questions. Where should we start? So I have a question of how is market value determined?
Typically what we do to determine market value is we will go to a pretty popular and easy site used as classiccars.com. We'll go there, and it's such a large site with people selling their cars from all over the country that we can go look up a 1955 Ford pickup, and we can have several examples in different conditions, and we see what they're asking for. So we attempt to go directly to the marketplace. There are some rare vehicles that it takes a little more looking. There won't be as many examples. readily, but most of what we see, there are plenty of examples online on sites. Haggerty also has a lot of information. They have some algorithmic type functions on their site where you can look up not real life examples, but you can look at see what maybe they rate them as, and sometimes theirs are, lately they've been inflating theirs a little bit higher than what you see in the marketplace, but they also have some examples that you can click on, some links to find some examples. There's a lot of car sites out there that can give you current market examples that will show photos, extensive photos of engine, interior, exterior, to where we can say, okay, our insured's condition falls around this range of these certain cars for sale, and that's pretty much what we want to agree to, is what we see in the marketplace, and we can be a little soft on that a little bit, but now and again, I got an appraisal the other day for I think it was a 30s pickup, and they had an appraisal that was $151,000, and looking in the marketplace, I saw some really beautiful examples that were totally frame-off restorations, spotless, show-type trailer queen vehicles. The most I saw for sale was $65,000 on these trucks. And what that $151,000 probably was a replacement cost. If you want to pay for a guy to do all this and restore a truck completely to the condition he had with all the extra stuff, they're thinking that it may cost that much for someone to redo what he's doing. But if that same fellow went to go sell his in the marketplace, it was bearing about a third of what that appraisal was listing it for. So we're not doing a replacement cost policy. We're doing an agreed value of, this is the agreed marketplace current value. And so we determine by real life market examples.
Okay. And so do you require an appraisal on vehicles?
No, we don't. We actually try to shy away from them to some degree, because we don't know if the appraisal is done independently. Sometimes it's a shop that does the appraisal, and we don't know if the insured knows this person or has had this person do the actual work. It's kind of tough to confirm that this is an independent appraisal, and also, is the appraiser a quality, professional, accurate appraiser? So there's a lot of there's not a lot of certainty on appraisals, and I've gotten appraisals on things in my life as well that they seem somewhat questionable. And I'm not saying the insurance out to trick anybody by any means, but when I see an appraisal for $151,000 on a truck, and I see the condition, and I look at other examples in the marketplace, and it's a third, and I'm seeing plenty of examples in the marketplace. I'm having to lean toward the marketplace because that's what we're trying to agree to. So appraisals, sometimes they may come in handy if they're listing out all the things that were done to this vehicle, and I'm looking at the photos and I'm seeing it's ostrich leather seats on the interior. Okay, that's going to bump up the value from the one I'm seeing online that's just got regular cowhide or leather on the seats. Yeah, that's going to go in a little bit, but is it going to triple the price of the vehicle? Probably not. So they can be helpful to some degree, but we typically don't ask for them.
Okay, I've had a lot of questions about some upper limit on agreed amount values, and it's both on kind of high performance as well as antique and classic cars. So could you speak a little bit about like the upper limit of the agreed amount value?
Sure, and like I said, there's in the webinar we just went over, we said that with underwriting approval, we can do cars up to $1 million, and there are some really rare cars out there that can go for a huge amount of money, and if we can confirm that value, yeah, we write one for $1 million. We do motorhomes close to $1 million quite a bit on a motorhome RV travel trailer product that we have. So, but as far as what we normally see, the normal range of most autos we get a lot of Camaros and Corvettes and a lot of Chevy products from the 60s and 70s. Those are probably the weight of it, and those have a range 20,000 mostly, and some of them go 40, 50, and then some of the really nicer examples of the older Corvettes, we've seen them 150,000 or more. These are just general values, but we had a Barracuda the other day that I think they wanted 500,000 for it, but in looking at it, it wasn't quite worth that, but I can't remember what exactly my coworker determined that, ballpark that range as. And we can give a little bit to some degree, but we can't give away the farm and create a moral hazard. As far as the performance question goes, when we see a car that's got a big blower and a roll cage and wheelie bars and a parachute on the back, we're not going to write that vehicle. We get them occasionally where we see some cars that are set up to drag race or street race, whatnot. Those are some things. Now, if it was just they had a pretty good performance engine in it, we probably could consider that to some degree. But when you start getting into things that are made like nitrous, we don't do nitrous on cars. We avoid the nitrous cars. So the performance, yeah, you can put your big block engine in there and whatnot. We've seen some of the GTOs came with the 3 dual carbs, so you got a 6 carb rated 400 something cubic inch engine in there, and that's kind of what came with them. So we're okay with that kind of stuff. It's just when you get into the nitrous and the parachute wheelie bars, and you're looking, they got the back end tubbed out where they can fit racing slicks, the big Hoosier racing slicks and whatnot. Those are a little beyond what our sort of a different style car that our program wasn't designed for. These are designed for your somewhat maybe modified or less, somewhat modified, but not modified for getting on a track, really. We've seen some cars submitted that had numbers painted on the windows, so that's not exactly what the chalk lines to where that that he just raced it or raced it recently and had the chalk numbers on his windows. So yeah.
So we have a ton of great questions. Let's see here. Here's a question. If the marketplace shows a higher value than what the insured bought the car for, will you insure the vehicle for the purchase price on an agreed amount policy?
Yes. I mean, for example, I understand what the question is. Let's say an insured buys a 69 Camaro for $20,000 and it's in such nice shape. We're seeing it going for $40,000, $50,000 online, and he wants to insure it for $20,000. Yeah, we could probably go for that. The problem on our end is we're probably not getting enough rate for a partial loss. In other words, he's got $45,000 worth of car that can get damaged partially. We're getting $20,000 worth of rate for a car, and so we're really only getting, you're in 2 halves of the car for one price, sort in a way. That would be the only problem on our end. Is if it's very undervalued, might go, well, this is so undervalued. But if he just paid it for that and got a great deal, usually they don't want to do that. Usually, if they know they got a great deal, insurers usually want to bump it up a little bit. But yeah, I would be willing to I would be willing to do that. If he just paid $20, that would probably be fair. If that's what he paid for it, that's a small. That is the marketplace. What he just did, he bought it. He got a great deal. It's not the average marketplace, but someone did sell it for $20, and yes, I would write a car that I thought was worth $40, $45 for $20.
Okay, so how can you change the agreed amount after the policy's been issued?
You can. Let's say they're in the midst of a restoration process. We discussed on one of the slides, there was a footnote at the bottom right that talked about the restoration needs to be in progress and at least 50% done. Let's say over the next 2 years he gets the vehicle restored, and he's put a lot of, and we look at it, and yeah, they do an endorsement saying, hey, the restoration is complete. He thinks that this car is now worth, $55,000. That we may ask for photos if it's something that we question of the car now that it's complete. But yeah, we don't say no, you can't by any means. We want to do things that make sense. Our best job, what we try to do, is we don't want to overinsure anyone to avoid the moral hazards that may come along with that. We don't want to underinsure anyone because of the rate we're missing for partial loss. What we want to do is get it as close to the true market value as we can. We feel that's in our best interest and the insured's best interest to get it as close as we can. We have no gain from getting it at a line too high or at a line too low. That doesn't help us here at all. What we want to do is get it right, as close to right as we can.
Totally agree. So you mentioned you may require photos. Do you require photos of all four sides with every bind order?
No. Generally speaking, if the car is worth less than $20,000 or 19, I think it is, might be our cutoff. If it's worth less than $19,000, typically we don't ask for photos, or if it's a car that's not pre-1960s. If it's 1960s or newer and it's under 20,000 or under 19,000, we typically don't ask for photos unless something doesn't make sense. We don't. Once cars get over 20, and that may change eventually. And let me explain something. This is sort of a side note. I hope that kind of answered the question, but and I'll get more into the photos in a little bit. But we have just taken this product over our specialty lines department. We used to be only boat, motorcycle, and umbrella products. We've just added the classic and antiques to us. We've taken it off of the plate of the auto and property underwriters. There's a lot of auto and property underwriters for the country, and the consistency we felt would be better for our clientele and our agents to bring it in-house and do a little bit more of the deeper underwriting that we do here in the specialty lines. They have a lot of automation in auto and home to where they don't underwrite, I guess, as deeply a lot of value and things of that nature like we're used to doing. Plus the size of our unit really facilitates us being in constant communication with each other and being on the same page. So with that being said, some of the ways that we used to underwrite are starting to change a little bit. We're loosening up on trying to make it easier for agents to place business with us. It's kind of a big ship, it seems. I didn't think the ship would be this big, but we're turning it slowly to get things, I think, to be easier to place business with us and not be so tight. Historically, I think on values we may have been a little too firm of our opinions, and so now we've been given some more give and take that we can do with agents on value, so that 20,000 or less or needing photos with 19, that may stand. It may loosen up, I'm not sure. And about the photos, getting back to that, basically if you stand at the front right of the car and take a photo of the driver's side and front, and go behind the car and take a picture of the passenger side and back, one of the interior, hopefully showing the seats and dash, and one of the engine, looking down on the engine, that's all the photos we generally require for that. Is basically 1, 2, 3, 4 photos. So if you do those photos well, that's usually all we need, and those don't take very long.
Okay. So we have just a ton of questions. Will you do classic cars or antique cars monoline?
Yeah. Yes, sir. Definitely.
Okay.
And if you just, like I said, the only piece of business you want to put with us is a classic or antique, God bless you, we'll take it.
Okay, and gray market cars? You know, in other words, cars that are manufactured outside the U.S. and brought in, and not originally built to meet the U.S. safety and emission standards.
You got an example of a gray market car?
I don't.
That would be a classic or antique. That's the thing. Now, if you have like a Japanese,
probably
like one of those old.
I would guess maybe. Yep, sorry about that. I guess an example might be like an older Porsche that is built for the non-U.S. roads and no emissions.
Yeah, we would be fine with that. That we had one the other day that had some right-hand drives. In other words, the steering wheel was on what we would consider in the U.S. the passenger side. We had a couple of those in here the other day, and it started a discussion a little bit. Someone wasn't really keen on them, and we all agreed that no, that's fine. There's not a problem with a right-hand side steering. It was an import from Japan that was made in Japan, and it was probably just like you were talking about, that it wasn't, of course, manufactured with the U.S. standards and CAFE standards in mind. But yeah, we'll write that.
Okay, and useful drivers on the antique cars? Useful drivers?
Yeah, you've got to have at least 10 years driving experience to be an eligible driver. And I would say on your standalones only list who's driving the vehicle. On your ones where you are adding a classic or antique along with regular private passenger autos, if there happens to be a driver underage, we are generally going to assume that, in general, if there's enough cars for drivers, you got 3 regular private passenger autos and mom, dad, and son or daughter in the house, it's 19, and the 4th vehicle is the classic, we're assuming that that young driver is not driving that classic auto, antique auto. We're generally making that assumption. If there's something that tips us off that maybe that might be the case, we might ask for a confirmation, but that is true. We are not looking for your classic antiques. The drivers have to have at least 10 years. So anyone under 20, 25, 26 years old should be a driver on a classic or antique.
Okay, just a few more questions. Will you write it in the business name?
No, they've got to be personally titled and written on, and the policy holder name insured has to be a person's name.
Okay. You mentioned some other collections on one of your slides. What other collections do you write?
Well, there's people that we've had people with 30, 50 cars. Just a single individual has a warehouse and they're full of cars, and so when you do a collection, sometimes we'll put one comp thing for policy. There's been some done with some policy level changes done to make it a little less premium when there's no way you can drive these cars hardly ever because there's 20 of them, 50 of them. So when you do have a collection, give us a call. There may be some rate things that we could do for someone. But yes, we'll definitely write someone that's a collector, not just 1 or 2 classics that has like multiples of 10,
Got it. So if it's art collections or any other collections, we can write it under the home or inland marine or however we choose to write that.
Right.
And
correct.
So,
yes, Dwight.
So one more question. Do you have a preferred vendor for a collector car claim? Or is it basically just a standard Safeco claims rep?
We use our in-house adjusters.
Okay. Well, I think there are probably another 30 questions. We'll end it here. To respect everybody's time, I will tell you thank you so much, Charles. Thank you for presenting today. We really appreciate a lot of great information, and I can tell you I will be contacting you to get some of these other questions answered because there's some good ones.
Great.
Yep.
And Dwayne, if they had a car in an LLC give us a call if they're looking to place that and they want to write it in a person's name, but it's titled in an LLC. Give us a call. We could try to talk about that, okay?
Okay. Sounds good. Well, on the screen, I have put up the contact information for us, the commercial, professional, and personal lines. And I will also follow up with everybody after this webinar with recording and some slides and an appetite guide and some other things. So again, I really appreciate everybody's time attending. And Charles, I really thank you for presenting.
My pleasure. Anytime. Thanks, Dwight.
Thank you.